A chilling plot uncovered. Authorities tipped off about a very detailed plan to attack a high school, to shoot students, and to bomb the school. Authorities say an 18-year-old honors student was already gathering the materials she needed and that she was determined not to survive.
These are the weapons that school and police officials had feared would be used in a massacre planned for April 5th. A shotgun, bomb-making materials, including pipes for a pipe bomb. A Columbine-style attack allegedly plotted by an 18-year-old student at Catoctin High School, 90 minutes from Washington.
There is no doubt in our minds that we averted a disaster up there.
According to the sheriff, that student, Nicole Severio, had kept a chilling diary with a timeline about the imminent attack and detail about the school's emergency procedures. But her alleged plot was foiled by her own father, who alerted school officials and police on Thursday when he discovered the diary. Police say the girl's diary specifically mentions Columbine. It's part of a disturbing trend. An ABC News investigation found that in the last 17 years, there have been at least 79 thwarted school massacre plots. More than half of the would-be attackers mentioned Columbine. Police have given no information about a possible motive, but they say there's no evidence of anyone else being involved in this alleged plot. As for the young student, she's been committed for an emergency mental health evaluation.
Yet another American Jewish facility has been evacuated after becoming the target of yet another bomb threat. Interestingly, the incident came after Israel arrested a teenager suspected of perpetrating most of the 120-plus fake attacks that have been plaguing the community for months. The Aaron family JCC in Dallas, Texas was evacuated after receiving a threatening telephone call on Thursday. That's the same MO allegedly used by the suspect in Israel, but he'd already been behind bars for several hours at the time of the latest incident. The Dallas center was closed during a search of the premises, but regular activity resumed within a short time. The same building was targeted by two previous threats. One prompted a similar evacuation in January, but the other hoax came by email earlier this month.
Now we start with breaking news this hour. Clashes have erupted in Paris after as many as 200 people gathered to protest against police brutality.
Well, at least 3 people have been arrested and several police officers slightly injured, according to reports, following the scenes of unrest that you've just seen there. This all unfolded late Monday evening in the 19th district of Paris, after some 200 people gathered there to hold a vigil for a 56-year-old local Asian man. The 56-year-old father of 5 was shot by a criminal police brigade at his house. The police are saying that at the time of an intervention over a house dispute, he attacked them with a pair of scissors, while his family are claiming that there was no such attack and the man was simply holding a pair of scissors because he was cooking fish at the time when the police knocked on his door.
A general strike has been launched in French Guiana in protest over the very high rates of crime and unemployment. The shutdown caused long queues for services in the South American territory, with this resident saying, "It's very, very complicated to organise. There is no more petrol, the stations are requisitioned by the forces of order, and the population is taken hostage." A group called the 500 Brothers is leading the strike, which is supported by 37 unions. The 500 Brothers, who wear black T-shirts and masks over their faces, say they are not a private militia and that they are standing up against organised crime. They also say they want more money from the government to improve the struggling health and education systems. Their spokesman said, "If we wanted to be a private militia, we would be armed. We would not have gone to see the authorities, and if we had to act, we would have acted in the shadows." This delegation of French government representatives went to the territory, but the 500 Brothers say they want to see the country's most senior politicians. This member said, "The Guyanese demand the immediate arrival of the Prime Minister and the Ministers of the Interior, Justice, Economy, Health and Finance. Greet the Minister for us and tell him to come." French Guiana is home to the European Space Agency's spaceport, where rockets are launched into space. But during strikes last week, several drivers stopped the transfer of the Ariane 5 rocket, forcing its launch to be postponed.
China is outraged after a Japanese high-ranking official visits Taiwan. Beijing has warned about the consequences of the visit for Sino-Japanese relations.
China is resolutely opposed to this and has already made solemn representations to Japan. Since the start of the year, Japan has said it respects its promises on the Taiwan issue, but actually it's been provocative in actions, which has caused serious disturbance to the improvement of Sino-Japanese ties.
Tokyo says Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs and Communications Jiro Akama has paid a visit to Taiwan to attend a tourism promotion event. Akama is the highest-level government official to travel to Taiwan since 1972. Tokyo severed diplomatic relations with Taipei back then.
China appears to have largely completed major construction of military infrastructure on artificial islands it has built in the South China Sea and can now deploy combat planes and other military hardware there at any time. The Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, or AMTI, part of Washington's Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the work on Fiery Cross, Subai, and Mischief Reefs in the Spratly Islands included naval, air, radar, and defensive facilities. China has denied U.S. charges that it is militarizing the South China Sea, although last week Premier Li Keqiang said defense equipment had been placed on islands in the disputed waterway to maintain freedom of navigation. China's 3 air bases in the Spratlys and another on Woodley Island in the Paracel chain further north would allow its military aircraft to operate over nearly the entire South China Sea, a key global trade route that Beijing claims most of. Several neighboring states have competing claims in the sea, which is widely seen as a potential regional flashpoint.
We are going to start today with news of some exercises by China. The Chinese government has released images of military drills conducted adjacent to its border with North Korea as the regime continues to make nuclear and missile threats. The state-run Chinese network system reported Monday that a Chinese Army unit stationed in the northeastern province of Jilin conducted exercises near the border last Friday that were aimed at verifying the response time of its forces. Now, watchers say the move is a means of upping military readiness against growing signs of an imminent North Korean nuclear test or intercontinental ballistic missile launch.
Well, the first UN talks on a global nuclear weapons ban are set to kick off with the participation of more than 100 countries in New York. The meeting comes weeks after the world body adopted a historic resolution calling on member states to start negotiations on a treaty to ban nukes. Last October, 123 countries agreed that they would launch the UN conference despite objection from most of the world's declared and undeclared nuclear powers. Britain, France, Israel, Russia, and the U.S. voted against the move, while China, India, and Pakistan abstained. The countries leading the effort include Austria, Ireland, Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, and Sweden. Hundreds of NGOs backed too. They say that the threat of a nuclear disaster is growing, and international consensus is needed for an effective nuclear disarmament.
Now, the first negotiations on a treaty to ban nuclear weapons kicked off at the UN headquarters in New York on Monday, but it did so without the support of major nuclear powers, and that includes the United States, Great Britain and France. About 40 nations are known to have boycotted the conference, which was attended by more than 100 others, amid rising nuclear threats out of Pyongyang.
The US's envoy said national security required nuclear arms because of bad actors who could not be trusted.
There is nothing I want more for my family than a world with no nuclear weapons. But we have to be realistic. Is there anyone that believes that North Korea would agree to a ban on nuclear weapons?
Britain's envoy was equally sceptical about the success of a complete ban.
The UK is not attending the negotiations on a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons because we do not believe that those negotiations will lead to effective progress on global nuclear disarmament. They cannot and will not work.
seguridad es la base para todo, la base para el desarrollo de cualquier sociedad. Si no hay un estándar mínimo de seguridad, no se puede invertir en educación, no se puede invertir en una seguridad social, no se puede invertir en el desarrollo de las empresas, en crear un Estado de Derecho sólido para prosperar.
Esta gente se dedica a vender armamento, misiles. Esto sí que es apología de la violencia. Nos dedicamos a la acción directa no violenta contra todo lo que es el militarismo. Para apoyar a las personas desplazadas por la guerra, y los mismos que provocan la guerra después se vuelven a beneficiar pues con la venta de material y tecnología para controlar a los que obligan a salir de sus casas.
The Islamic State group has released a video showing signs of significant damage to Syria's Tabqa Dam. The dam is located 40 kilometers upstream of the jihadist stronghold Raqqa on the Euphrates River. ISIL accused the U.S.-led coalition of targeting the dam with airstrikes. The Amaq news agency video includes aerial footage of smoke rising over the dam and what ISIL claimed to be a destroyed control room and an unexploded missile. But the coalition doubted the authenticity of the video, claiming it was taking every precaution to ensure the integrity of the dam. Fighting at the dam was paused, and as U.S.-backed forces called off military operations on Monday that allow a technical team to work on the structure. Syrian Democratic Forces, bolstered by airstrikes and military advisors from the U.S.-led coalition, were approaching Tabqa town from both the south via the air base and the north near the dam as they close in on Raqqa city.
American troops are headed to the fight against ISIS. Pentagon producer Lucas Tomlinson tells us how many and where they're going.
U.S. defense officials tell Fox 2 companies from the 82nd Airborne Division based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, some 200 troops in all, will be departing soon for the ISIS fight in Mosul. This comes days after the USS George H.W. Bush entered the Persian Gulf to begin airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. The Pentagon is also ramping up operations against terrorist groups around the world, with increasing focus on the African continent. U.S. officials tell Fox the Department of Homeland Security's recent ban on electronic devices larger than cell phones on flights to the United States from some Muslim nations was imposed in part because a laptop was used to bomb this Somali airliner last year. Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Somalia, claimed responsibility for the attack, and the top U.S. general for Africa says the terror group could strike again in the future.
I think Al-Shabaab has demonstrated they could do this in the past, so I think it's something that we just continue to watch and have to stay after.
This increasing terrorist threat from Al-Shabaab is one of the reasons General Waldhauser recently asked the new administration for greater authority to strike Al-Qaeda's third largest affiliate on his own terms.
I think the combatant commanders, myself included, are more than capable of making judgments and determinations on some of these targets, and I'm well capable, and we are all well capable of making those calls.
General Waldhauser recently told Congress Al-Shabaab regained territory last year and today continues to carry out attacks on U.S.-backed African forces and Western hotels in the capital, Mogadishu. 3,000 miles north of Somalia, ISIS remains a nagging problem with up to 200 fighters regrouping in southern Libya, requiring the continued presence of U.S. Special Operations Forces on the ground to help with future airstrikes.
ISIS has not left. We're going to keep a presence on the ground because you have to have that there. And we're going to develop intelligence and take out targets when they arise.
Daesh could go bankrupt if it loses all its territory. The group's revenues have already halved, dropping from approximately 1.89 billion in 2014 to 870 million in 2016. Daesh is still considered one of the richest terrorist organizations. The group has made money from oil, taxes and fines, kidnappings, looting and confiscating property. But its business model might fail soon as its territory slowly shrinks. Operations by the militaries of several countries have forced Daesh to retreat, That includes airstrikes and ground offensives, not only in Iraq, but in Syria. Now, if the terrorist group goes bankrupt, will that be the end of Daesh? Their operations and ability to attack require little funding, as they rely more on inspiring attackers through their propaganda, and are in a hurry to claim attacks in many cases. So can Daesh actually be defeated?
With Passover just a few weeks away, Israelis all over the country are making possible travel plans. But the Israeli Counterterrorism Bureau has just issued heavy travel warnings to Jordan, Turkey, and Egypt. According to the Bureau, these three countries, which border Islamic State-controlled territories, are at a high risk for attacks. The governmental body specifically warned of both attacks and attempts to kidnap Israeli citizens. Among countries outside the Middle East that the Counterterrorism Bureau warned against are Russia, France, Belgium, Germany, and India. The head of the Counterterrorism Bureau said, quote, "The more the Islamic State or ISIS is backed into a corner, the more it would try to execute attacks across the world on every possible front, against Christians, Crusaders, and Jews. Israel is not at the center of the threats, but Israelis are required to be vigilant," end quote. Turkey received the second highest threat warning, where Israelis are advised not to visit, and if they're already visiting, to return immediately. Egypt and Jordan received the third highest level, indicating a basic concrete threat, meaning Israelis are advised to avoid these areas. The Sinai Peninsula specifically, however, received a very high threat evaluation, with the Bureau head saying that ISIS in the Sinai, quote, "have no red lines," and that Israelis entering the Sinai during the holiday would be irresponsible, end quote.
Turning now, Vice President Mike Pence was one of the headliners for the kickoff of the AIPAC event Sunday here in Washington. He addressed the crowd of nearly 20,000 pro-Israel lobbyists and other supporters as he underscored the important alliance between the United States and Israel.
United States Vice President Mike Pence says that President Trump is still committed to moving the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Quote, "The President of the United States is giving serious consideration to moving the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv," Pence said during his speech at AIPAC's annual policy conference yesterday evening. Pence went on to say that Trump is interested in finding an equitable and just resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in reference to the President's Special Representative for International Negotiations, Jason Greenblatt. Greenblatt held meetings with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in what was billed as a listening tour 2 weeks ago. According to the report from the Kremlin, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and Russian President Vladimir Putin are said to meet in Moscow on May 11th. The two leaders have not held a meeting together in Moscow since April of 2015. Putin and Abbas are said to discuss the stalled Middle East peace process, the general situation in the Middle East, and the results of the annual summit of Arab League states, which is scheduled for later in the week in Amman. According to both Kremlin and other sources, Russia has expressed multiple times an interest in mediating a peace process between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, Putin had even invited both Abbas and PM Netanyahu to Moscow for direct talks, but no such meeting has yet been scheduled. Thus far, the PA has consistently refused direct negotiations in favor instead of internationally imposed resolutions and preconditions.
Russian officials have welcomed Iranian President Hassan Rouhani as he arrives in Moscow for a 2-day visit. Now, Rouhani is scheduled to visit with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, and Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev during his stay in Moscow. Before flying to Russia, Rouhani called for more cooperation between Tehran and Moscow in the energy sector, and that Tehran welcomes Russia's investment in the Islamic Republic. He said that Tehran and Moscow hold a similar stance on the fight against terrorism. During his visit, the two sides are to sign several economic and trade agreements and discuss regional and global developments.
India says it plans to seal borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh in an effort to fight what it calls terrorism, smuggling, drug trafficking and problems of illegal immigration.
We have decided to seal the borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh as soon as possible. I know it's a difficult task due to mountains, dense forests and difficult terrains, but we will use technological solution wherever needed.
The minister was on a 2-day visit to border areas where he interacted with border guard officers and civil administrators to review defense preparedness. India's decision to close borders comes amid heightened tensions with Pakistan. The tensions began to rise following a deadly attack on an Indian military base in Indian-controlled Kashmir last year. New Delhi blamed the attack on Pakistan. Islamabad vehemently rejected that. The two neighbors have also been trading sporadic firing along the border region of Jammu and Kashmir. India and Pakistan brawl continues mainly over disputed Kashmir region, which both claimed since their partition and independence from Britain in 1947.
Although beach balls, inflatable toys, and umbrellas are still banned from Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, home of the Arkansas Razorbacks, you soon will be permitted to bring your gun to the big game. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson has signed a bill into law allowing people to carry concealed handguns into bars, government buildings, places of worship, onto college campuses, and even the state capitol. The Republican governor who chaired the National Rifle Association Task Force, which called for trained armed staff at schools after the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, said, quote, "This bill, in my view, reflects the will of the General Assembly and is constitutional and will balance public safety and the Second Amendment. The Arkansas measure does require people to go through some training before obtaining a concealed carry permit. To lawfully carry, people will have to undergo up to 8 hours of active shooter training. Concealed handguns are still banned at K-12 schools, courtrooms, and prisons."
Today, Uber said it is resuming testing of self-driving cars in Arizona and Pittsburgh. National correspondent William Longinus tells us why the company was tapping the brakes on the program over the weekend.
Self-driving trucks and cars are still at least 3 years away, but the road getting there has had more than a few bumps. The latest Friday in Arizona, when a driver illegally made a left turn, crashing into a self-driving Uber SUV. 2 employees inside escaped injury.
I hope this brings new jobs. I hope it brings convenience and safety.
Uber's self-driving program arrived in Arizona in December after a dispute in California over mandatory accident reporting. Unlike California, Arizona doesn't require a special permit for self-driving vehicles.
Once you are in autonomous driving mode, we want to make sure that you always feel that you still have control of the vehicle.
About 6 companies test autonomous cars in 13 states. And while there is no central repository of accident data, in December an Uber SUV did not see a stoplight in San Francisco and sailed through a crosswalk. Last February, a Google autonomous car sideswiped a bus while trying to pass. In May, a Tesla driver died in a self-driving crash, but investigators could not attribute it to the autopilot system.
All of the things that go wrong with the driverless car world are going to force us to create a much more safe and durable system.
According to the website Recode, Uber's 43 self-driving cars travel up to 20,000 miles a week, but a human must still take control approximately every 0.8 of a mile.
The theory that if you remove the driver, you remove driver error, there are several defects to that theory. First of all, the automation has to work. If the automation doesn't work, then what? If the automation fails, will it fail safe?
4-year-old Leah Carroll is lip-syncing her heart out to her favorite gospel song called Overcomer. It's a bold choice for a little girl who has spent more time inside Oakland Benioff Children's Hospital than she has outside. Some of her closest playmates are the nurses treating her for severe congenital neutropenia. It's a rare blood disorder where bone marrow is unable to make normal white blood cells. Dr. Allison Matsunaga was one of the first to treat her.
She has issues with just normal feeding, so she's required many different treatments.
To distract Leah from boredom and sometimes pain, her mother looked for songs on the internet. That's how Leah became a fan of gospel singer Mandisa. It was this one video of Leah singing Overcomer that transformed the pint-sized patient into an internet sensation with more than 37 million views. Lindsay is Leah's mother.
What is it about that video that you think resonates with people?
The world needed some joy right now, especially in the United States. I think Leah just has this pure joy about her.
Leah has survived 2 bone marrow transplants and numerous side effects.
And the song itself is just really, really fitting for her life.
Little Leah's voice has inspired both the sick and healthy who have posted comments on her video from around the world, even inspiring Mandisa herself.
It's Mandisa!
Doctors say Leah's neutropenia is close to being cured, earning her the nickname Leah, the Overcomer. Mireya Villarreal, CBS News, Oakland, California.